Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on to the Dalitalks show. I am excited to have this conversation with you because I really believe in what you're doing. And it means a lot to me because, as you know, I've been working in the space of bullying awareness and prevention. And that usually means that I work with teachers and I see their challenge as well as parents. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to the point to where you're at now.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. It's great to talk with you again. So I started my journey as a music teacher. I was a music teacher in the public schools for 15 years. I really thought that was going to be it for me. I loved it and I was really great at it and I built lots of programs. And during COVID, everything kind of shifted for me. I went through a divorce, I moved, I ended up taking some time off of school. I had to figure out teaching music online, all of the things that everyone was kind of dealing with, plus a couple of little extra special sauce things on there as well. And I started my PhD in educational psychology and dove into the research and work of mindset. I became a certified emotional intelligence practitioner. And I've been really studying cognitive neuroscience my whole career. I was always fascinated by it. I thought if I could understand more about my students' brains, then I could teach them better. So all of those ideas kind of combined into this beautiful moment of me realizing, I think I can maybe pivot and do something different while still honoring my mission in my work, which is truly to inspire people to discover their voice. So I decided to open up my business and I resigned from teaching, which was incredibly scary at the time. And I started Empowered Educator. So now I work with teachers and school leaders and focus on the social and emotional well-being of all of the adults in schools.
And I love that because number one, it's rare to see that. Maybe it's just me,
No,
but
it is.
yeah, right. When I remember when I began my Dalitalks, I interviewed a lot of educators, and one of the questions I asked them was, what type of support do you receive when it comes to helping you manage like bullying, at schools? Like who taught you how to manage it, how to identify it and all of that stuff. And all of them said, no one. One out of, I think the first focus group I did was like 21 teachers, and only one of them had taken a course on inequity, which touched a little bit on bullying. And then when it came to professional development, almost every single one of them, this surprised me because, I was new to the whole, like what teaching looks like. And they'd always say, oh, I'm so sick of PD, professional development. They just PD, and it's not really valuable what they're teaching us. So can you speak a little bit on your perspective and your experience as a teacher and what that looked like?
Yeah, most of the PD sucked. I am fully there with you with all of that and with all of those teachers too, which is I think important in regards to what I can bring to the table because I've been on the other side, and especially as a music teacher, as an encore class, there are so many times that hours and hours and hours of my life. Clearly, I still have some feelings about this. Sitting in the auditorium, just thinking to myself, all of the other things I could be doing in this moment, and how this is just not relevant to me. And the thing is, if they were creating some sort of new initiative, which on the surface seemed really important, so many of us were so overwhelmed or had whiplash from all the new initiatives that were happening year after year after year that there wasn't any engagement. There was no buy-in. So it was a waste of time, a waste of money. And of course, I'm generalizing here. I could probably pick out a handful and maybe still have fingers left over for how many of them were like really great. But it does. It's not always what teachers need. I think a lot of times it serves a different purpose, either to check a box or to move into a direction of an idea that an administrator has or a new focus of whatever the school is going to go. And there is value in that. But at the end of the day, if the teachers aren't present, mentally, emotionally, it's a waste. And so the work that I do is kind of that fundamental work to get educators in a spot for them to be open, for them to have agency in how they want to show up in any given time and space, and to feel empowered as to, okay, I can't change the fact that I have to be in this meeting all day. How do I want to show up? And that's a skill set that is not taught. And that's where Empowered Educator comes in.
You make so many very good points. Now, first, because I think a lot of parents listening are going to ask, well, what do you mean, all this PD is, it sucks and it's not very valuable. Can you give us some examples of the type of professional development that you were provided that, on the surface, you said it looked good, but really that's not what teachers needed?
Yeah, and I think for the parents listening out here too, comparing it to any sort of, I want to say corporate job too. There are things that and initiatives that happen, or sometimes there's state mandates, right? Or even just the safety protocols that have happened in the last couple of years. At some point, it doesn't matter how important it is. What matters is the recipient's ability to receive, right? And so I think that piece of it is the part that is ignored, where someone has the idea of like, hey, this is going to be a great idea for our school, and it's going to move our school in all these new directions, and on paper it looks awesome. But if the teachers and the people receiving, whoever you are not mentally open and available, it's falling on deaf ears. And so I think the idea that a lot of this PD is not relevant or valuable, I think you bring up you made me think of this good point. It's missing the piece that it's not necessarily the content, but it's how it's being received, and that part needs to happen in order for any new things to come to fruition.
Okay. And so how often do teachers usually have PD?
Oh, well, that depends. Oftentimes, at least in New York, where I am, generally there's, three-ish full days. And if you are in a district that's really supportive of, your professional growth and development, you can often get leave. So, when I was teaching, I would seek out conferences because as a music teacher, especially, I really wanted to get good at my craft. And my district was hardly ever, if at all, providing music specific professional development. So I would go seek it out myself, and I would travel, and I would get leave time too. But there are a handful of days, and there are certainly requirements depending upon which state you're in to maintain your professional certification, that you need a certain amount of hours of professional development.
So you said 3 days, a school year, a month? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All
yeah,
right.
a school year. Mm-hmm.
So then what are those training days that kids, they're released like half a day and then the teachers stay back? Is that not considered part of professional development time that's provided to the teachers?
I think, in my experience, yes, but I think it also depends upon the district. I've worked now with a lot of districts across the country, and no two are the same. Mm-hmm. So, sometimes there's that leave time to do things like professional learning communities, where teachers get together who are in teams. For example, in middle school, often the middle school model has to do with teams. If that sounds familiar, your child kind of goes through the same 5 teachers. It's not mm-hmm. kind of all over the place like in high school. So the team teachers would get together and talk about each individual student, or, for example, all of the science teachers would get together and make sure the curriculum was really aligned. So sometimes those days aren't necessarily professional development, as in someone's coming in to teach content, but there's actual working hours where that's where a lot of the juicy stuff happens that moves kids forward in the directions that they need to go.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. There's so much going on. I'm realizing that, and that's that I volunteered for years at schools. So I kind of got to see some of the work that teachers do, and it's very admirable. It looks, oh my gosh, very exhausting some days, depending on what's going on. But you also mentioned, this, the training, and I would assume that this burns out a lot of teachers because they have, to do their own professional development, always making sure that they're on top of their own things. But then there's also the support that's sometimes provided or not provided at schools. So can you give us an idea of some of the challenges that teachers have when dealing with the parents and dealing with administration?
Well, how long do we have? And it's funny, that's usually the answer that I get from my teachers too. When, whenever I first start to work with anybody, we have to talk about the stressors first, because otherwise it's as if we're just ignoring them and we're saying, okay, well, now you're going to be doing this other thing. In my world, you have to understand what the stressors are so we can talk about them in a way that's productive, instead of either, shoving them down and pushing them aside, which obviously causes more angst and stress and frustration and anxiety and all of that stuff. Or we're just complaining about it,
Mhm.
right? And so unless we have a safe space to get it out, we're not able to deal with it proactively. So, it's everything, Dolly. And the thing is, yes, there are so many external stressors, and it's important to separate all of the external stressors from the internal stress, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what the external stressors are. We all experience stress internally the same. So what could be really stressful for me, for example, might not be stressful for you, but you might find something else very stressful that I'm totally cool with. So, the different, dynamics and the ecosystems within the school, all of the different energies and emotional, experience and trauma that's coming into the classroom, not just from the kids, but also in your colleagues too, right? The different dynamics in the relationships that you have with all of the adults, the political climate, right? The community climate, the social climate of the school, the relationships with parents. I mean, plus, the little thing, the pandemic, which is causing a lot of information gaps, that they're finding now of those learning gaps that are happening. And programs are getting cut. Like, I mean, it's everything. Right? So, I mean, I can go on and on forever, but I'm not as interested in that, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter unless we deal with the internal stress, right? And it's understanding, okay, all of these things are happening. These are external things totally out of my control. How do I handle my own stress so I can show up as my best self and make empowered decisions that will move me forward in reaching my goals and how I want to show up, how I want to be, and how I want to live my life, both at work and at home.
Yeah. So let's talk about what that looks like when you, as the person helping teachers, because I know on one side is parents have such a powerful voice that they can request certain things for teachers. And from what I've been told by every single teacher I've ever spoken to is when the parent asks, the administration listens, but when the teacher asks, they're kind of like, whatever. So yeah. So what does that look like with that relationship with the parents and the teacher? How can they help one another out?
Well, I think it's really important to understand that everyone's on the same team, right? And
Yes.
so, when a teacher is reaching out about your child, it's not an us versus, like, they're no bad guys, right?
Yeah.
There's not an us versus them. And it's so easy to point fingers when our feelings are hurt, or we are our ego is hurt a little bit, maybe about something that was said, or there's some sort of defensiveness that happens when a teacher is calling about your child. But at the end of the day, you both have the same goal, right? And finding that common ground is really important, because then you can start to have a conversation, right? And so having that understanding, first of all, and then the next thing is, if you're a parent who's like, yes, got that, I'm obviously, Jen, totally with you, ask your teachers, like, how can I support you? What do you need? And if just that question alone opens up a door of communication and trust. And that way, when things come up throughout the year and along the line, there's a pathway now that's open in a relationship that can be built, because teachers need support. Yes, kids are with them most of the day, but then they're also with you most of the day.
Mhm.
So in working together, we can all reach those same goals.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for letting know for explaining that, because I feel like parents really are afraid of asking certain questions to the teachers. And you're right. I see a lot of us versus them mentality, which is one of the things that I always tell them, like, hey, you guys, you're allies. Whatever your child needs, you both want the same end result, right? Which is safety of your child, for them to achieve, their academic goals in a healthy way, and for them to also have fun, because learning doesn't have to be boring. So,
Really?
so let's talk about these empowered educator workshops that you do, the series. They sound really interesting and fun, to be honest. And you talk about emotional intelligence, mindset, cognitive neuroscience, and a lot of people are like, "What the heck is cognitive neuroscience? And how does that benefit my child's teacher?" So, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Oh, this gets my tail wagging. So all of this is really about um, understanding your brain. And it really boils down, that's what cognitive neuroscience in my world is really about, understanding your brain. And here's the thing, we underestimate the power of this tool between our ears all the time. And up until recently, when I first started really diving into this work, I just thought, I had a brain, like I have a heart and I have lungs and I have a stomach, and everyone just kind of does its job. And here I am, just kind of along for the ride. When in fact, you have so much more agency than you realize in how to live your life. And once you understand that, 95 to 97% of the time we are operating on our subconscious, which means we are just kind of on autopilot, we're in default, we are, just having these knee-jerk reactions to everything that's happening around us, which causes a lot of the stress that we're feeling. When we can tap into that 3 to 5% of consciousness to make informed decisions in the moment of, how do I want to show up right now, everything changes. Everything changes. So, why I love your work and what you're doing, and how I think what I do and what you do has a really nice partnership, is because in those moments of activation, in those moments of triggering, in those moments of hurt and pain, it is so important that we know how to navigate that as best we can, so we can get to the other side with compassion and grace and growth. And unless we know what those skills are, everyone's just hurt and in pain all the time. And it doesn't have to be that way. And what I've seen as a result of some of the teachers who have been working through my programs is that, yes, I work exclusively with teachers and administrators, over adults really right now, parents too. But this filters into the kids because they show up differently. Their interactions with other adults are different. Their interactions with other kids are different. Because let's just take this example, right? A kid comes in activated, which then triggers the teacher. Mm-hmm. Right? The teacher then is activated and then continues to trigger the student. And then the trigger, and then someone gets sent to the office. Right? And it's not the teacher. And then, so in what I teach is, in that moment, you notice that, oh, okay, I'm feeling activated right now. What can I do to deactivate my nervous system so I can actually show up and give this child what they need, that their behavior actually isn't about me at all? And that moment is critical to changing the trajectory of everything that's going to happen next.
That is so important, because as you're saying this, I'm thinking, we have all these unconscious biases, all these unconscious beliefs. And yeah, if you're already triggered and you're receiving that negative energy because the child walked in and something happened, sometimes, we're human and we make mistakes and we judge based off of those unconscious biases. So when thinking about because you have a workshop that I saw and I was like, oh, I want to take this one, the confidence in conflict workshop. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, that is so good. I wish every teacher had the opportunity to take that, because I see situations that happen at schools where the teacher is so frustrated and sometimes taken aback or even nervous, and it just goes sideways. And then the child is left thinking, well, that teacher doesn't care about me. And then the parent is informed about what happened. And then now the parent thinks, well, what the heck is going on? Why are you not defending my child? And that just stresses out the teacher. And of course, they worry about how they're going to be reviewed. And, is this parent now going to go to the principal and say, I didn't do right by their child? And how will that look on me and my career? So can we talk
down and down and down and down we go,
right?
Yeah.
It just snowballs. So tell us a little bit about the workshops that you offer teachers.
Sure. So there's a couple of ways that I get the work out there. I offer usually either monthly workshops or bi-monthly workshops that anybody can join. That confidence and conflict one is one of them, and really goes through my tenets of what it means to be an empowered educator. There are 8 of them, and it's mission and vision. It's metacognition, which is a big word for brains, thinking about how we're thinking, right? Reflection, which really goes into those biases, those implicit biases that you were talking about. We talk about advocacy and the power of our language, well-being, and emotional intelligence. And so all of the workshops really fall into one of those 8 categories, with the idea being, going through the program really gives you the skill set to feel empowered. And what's beautiful about it is that I've had people go through my entire course multiple times, because once you reach a ceiling, then all of a sudden your ceiling becomes your floor, and now you're a new person now. And then all of a sudden you start to get really deeper into the work. So the work doesn't stop. You just don't wake up one day and you're like, I'm empowered now and everything's great. It is a practice, and it is also a practice that I do every single day. Everything that I teach, I work on myself. So I am constantly an example of the work for the people that I am working with, which is really important to me, because I need to be that example, to show you and anyone who I work with that not only is this possible, but it's limitless, and so I'm constantly pushing the boundaries of my own abilities to show up the way I want to show up, so everyone who works with me knows that they can too. But this particular confidence and conflict class is new. That came out of actually a podcast episode that I did with my sister, who is certified as a mediator, and in conflict management. She's also a certified emotional intelligence practitioner. She actually works in the veterinary industry, but she pretty much does the same thing that I do, but in that industry. So the two of us have been, since we were little, wanting to work together. So it's been really cool that now we're finally here, able to do that. So she and I were having a podcast episode. We were talking about confidence and conflict management. And out of that podcast, this workshop was born, because we were like, this needs to be more than just that podcast episode. So really, it's about understanding why you have whatever feelings you have about conflict, and understanding the self-awareness skills to identify in the moment how you are feeling, recognizing your hot buttons, what really triggers you, what makes you either fight, flight, or freeze. And you can pretty easily, once we dive in, it's pretty easy to identify, understand, some of where that even came from, depending upon how you grew up. Conflict was different for everybody in everybody's household. For me, growing up, I was pretty conflict avoidant. So when I got to work, it was more important for me to be agreeable than to speak my mind and potentially cause conflict, even though I needed to advocate for myself or problem solve. And so what happens is you create this toxic silence, which isn't healthy either. So it's identify, and that's just me. There are several of those, that we go through. And what's really special about that particular course is it comes with an assessment that goes through the organization that we're working with. So you actually get an individualized and personalized report as to how you are right now dealing with conflict, so you know where you can focus your energy on and how you want to improve. So I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I love this. I think every parent should take it. because
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I constantly think like, why is this child getting to me when she does this or says that, you know?
Mhm,
So yeah,
mhm.
I'm very much into the looking within because it's so hard to dig it out and then going to a professional who knows how to pull those things out of you, you know, to help you look within. I think that's super valuable. So your workshops, are they usually one day? Are they several, you know, how long are they?
Oh, it depends. So, most of them are just one day, an hour, 2 hours, because really what that is, it's kind of a taste as to what I do. Because ultimately it's wonderful to do a workshop with individual teachers. We kind of get to know each other, and I have several teachers who come back week after week or month after month. Or are in several of my programs. But where I focus a lot of my attention is going into school districts, because that really changes the culture of the school. Where, if we're going to a faculty meeting and I'm like, hey, Dolly, I'm going to be 2 minutes late because I need to calm down my nervous system. And you're like, cool, Jen, see you soon. Like, that's kind of the conversation that I envision for an empowered educator school district. So a lot of the programs that I offer for individual teachers, like I said, are these either monthly or bi-monthly programs. I also have an awesome subscription where you get group coaching with me once a month and a beautiful video library of all of these self-regulation techniques. But having that community with other teachers is really important. So that group coaching aspect where you can actually see other educators who are working on the same thing, develop relationships with them too. So that you're not alone in this work, that there are people who are really showing up for themselves. And like you said, pointing inward, everything that you need, you have inside of you already.
Mhm.
And all I do is just kind of shine a little flashlight so you can see it yourself. But it's been really beautiful for teachers, educators, and really everybody. My I say educators, but my definition of an educator is really anyone who works with kids, whether you're a parent or you're a librarian or a pediatrician, like whatever, you're an educator. You are educating our youth. So it's important for everybody to understand their own power and to feel empowered in every given situation.
Yeah. Jen, I love it very, very much. I especially appreciate that this is all research based. That's
Oh
very,
yeah.
very, yeah, that's so important to me. Even if it's something for my own personal life, I want something that's research based, that it's solid, it's reliable. So when you're working with schools, do you are you I'm asking this question because if people are listening and they're like, wow, we could really use this at my school, who should people go to? Like, hey, I know Jen and she does these workshops. So is that something that should be referred to the principal or maybe PTA? Like, who usually pays for these type of classes for the teachers? Because teachers already spend a lot of their own money for other
Mhm.
things. So we want to make sure that we help our teachers by going to the right people who have the funding.
Yeah, which is also why the one-off workshops that I do for teachers are usually at a very low price point or free. And the subscription is the same way, because teachers do not need to pay for their own PD. They're I believe very strongly that there needs to be funding for them. And if you want to do all these extra little things, great. But the bigger stuff, that can be paid for in other ways, and there is funding out there. And to answer your question, it's different for every district. A lot of times the PTA is a great place to start, particularly if you want to even provide a gift. The programs that I'm offering for these individual teachers are, like I said, at a really low price point to get somebody in. So I'm not sure when this is airing, but during the holidays, that's something that I'm definitely putting out there as a parent gift to a teacher, is get them a subscription to my break time. Get them go in with everybody and get them a course, for that I have, because that is, a mug is great, I guess. Or like a gift certificate to Dunkin' Donuts is fine, I guess. But like, if you really want to help a teacher and show them that, yes, I care about you and I value you and thank you for taking care of my child, and I want you to show up as your best self. Like, think about it, right? When you are going in for surgery, you want the best doctor, and that doctor better have had a good night's sleep the night before. right? I mean,
Yeah.
like, that's it, like, and we need to look at the work of our teachers and our educated by, again, like administrators too, the same way. We want teachers to be able to show up as their best selves because what they're doing is so important. And here's where, I mean, if I talk a lot to you about this even more, I will burst into tears, because this is the thing that, yes, Empowered Educator is for teachers, but it's really for kids, right?
Yeah.
Because empowered teachers empower their students. Happy teachers make happy students. And if we look at the great resignation that's happening right now and the burnout that's happening, those teachers are showing up for your kids, and it's not okay. And we need actual solutions that are more than just mental health days and massages and bubble baths. And those things are great, but it doesn't lead to sustainable well-being. This does, because it teaches the skill sets that you need to show up every day and puts the power back in your hands to decide how you want to be. So those are, answered your question and then some. But, the best thing to do actually is, if you're unsure, is head over to my website, which is empowerededucator.com, and either shoot me an email via the contacts page, or just schedule a connection call with me. That's the best way that I get to know you and what your needs are and how I can help support you.
Yeah, yeah. Because I also saw that you offer coaching, you offer the workshops, but you also offer keynote speaking. And I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have a resource library available on your website, which I want people to know about and use. And on top of that, you have your podcast.
Yes, and I just have starting December 6th to a radio show called Let's Talk About This, and that's going to be an ongoing thing where I answer questions. So I have a place for people to record their questions, and I bring on a friend of mine and a different person each week, and we answer your questions together. And that's been really fun and a good way to really get to know, like, what are you thinking about and how can we help support you. So I can share that link too, if people wanted to ask a question and be heard on the show.
Yes, absolutely. I love that, because sometimes people do want to ask the questions, but they don't know who to ask, or they think about it in the moment and then later forget. So having the link will be very, very useful. There was another question I had in regards to gifting the workshops or any of your services to teachers. What have you seen that is the biggest challenge when you go to a school and offer your services? Let's talk about that so that parents can kind of like have that in mind and maybe think of how to overcome that objection.
A challenge about getting the work in the door?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I haven't had any, because the truth is, people who want to work with me want to work with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't deliver this work unless people are ready for it. Because at the end of the day, if there are folks who are sitting with their arms crossed, who are like, oh, what's this new thing coming down the pike now, put this on my plate, it's not gonna it's a waste. And so when I have the conversation with either the teachers or the parents, and then it gets to the point where I'm talking with the person who will decide, okay, is this something that we want to bring to our school district? If that person is usually at that point, that person is saying to me, yes, thank you, where have you been all my life? We need this. Our morale is low, we have problems with retention, we have teacher absenteeism, we have chaos. I feel like I'm just like putting out fires all the time. We have these group of really great teachers who are starting to burn out, and I want to be able to support them. So when I come in, I'm like, okay, yeah, cool, I can help you with all of that stuff. Here's what I need from you in order to set the stage, so when I come in, we're ready to go. So and again, usually it comes from some sort of referral, someone who knows of me, someone who's taken my course before. So it's not just me being like, hey, this is, these are Jen's great ideas. They're not, this is a research-based program where now I have this person, this person, this person, this person that who has already seen results. I'll tell you, I have this one woman, I mean, I'm so many, but one in particular I'm thinking of right now. I maybe have seen her 5 times in the last 2 months. And she said to me the other day, Jen, I cannot believe how much change that I have made in my life because of the work that we have done together in this short amount of time. She's like, I have gone to therapy for years. I have read every single self-help book and nothing has stuck the way that this work has stuck. And she gave me example after example after example in these moments where old her would have been activated and escalated a situation. And now all of a sudden she's showing up completely differently and is already noticing an effect, not just in her own well-being, but her family, how she's showing up with her family, how she's showing up with her coworkers, how she's showing up at the doctor's office. Like, these are life changes that happen just in even just a small amount of time with the work that people do with me. So, the more we can get on board with this, and particularly this idea that nothing changes if nothing changes. It doesn't matter what kind of new curriculum or new initiative you're throwing at people. If the foundation isn't there, nothing's ever going to change.
I thank you so much for sharing that, because that was going to be my next question. Can you share something, like a positive experience that you had with a client? And that's really good to know, because you're absolutely right. I find that when you start working in a certain area in your life, it just impacts the rest.
And well, wherever you go, there you are.
Right.
You're the same person, both at work and at home. So that's another thing too. What I talk about, yes, we first talk about work, but oftentimes what happens is like, well, this thing is happening too, and this thing is happening too, which is why the podcast is so cool, because I get to actually address a lot of those things, not directly in my workshops necessarily, but for example, one of the people are like, I'm really stressed out about money. Okay, so if you are stressed out about money and you're showing up to school and you can't pay your bills, or you have an overdue this or whatever, how are you showing up? You're not. So, okay, let me get a financial person on here and we're going to talk finances. It's not gonna be me, but I have now a person there. I have another person, a divorce coach. You're going through a divorce and you're going to school. How are you showing up? Well, let's have someone come on and who's going to talk to you about how you can manage that so you can be your best self when you're with your students. Next week, I have a fashion stylist coming on, because if you're feeling frumpy dumpy in your clothes and you're not feeling confident, well, then how are you showing up? And these are direct responses from what teachers are telling me they need. So, again, it's not just, this is what I think you need. I am listening to what the tone is and delivering really what you're asking for.
Yeah, this is so helpful, because you know what? I think that we need to humanize teachers more. I don't think that parents and kids, because like if I'm at Target and my child, and this has actually happened, my kids will see one of their teachers. They're like, oh my gosh, there's my teacher. And oh my gosh, look, she has a husband. And I'm like, of course. Or like, oh my gosh, she's with her child. I'm like, she's a mom. Like, yes, your teacher's human too. Mm-hmm. And parents do that too sometimes and don't realize it, because they'll bump into a teacher. They're like, oh, this is odd. I'm bumping into, it's not Mrs. So-and-so. This is now a human being with a whole life just like you. So,
yeah. And actually, I do want to speak to that for a second, because so my TED Talk was in October, and the link that, like the clip that went viral, like right now, over 1 million people have seen this clip right now.
Ooh, congratulations.
Yeah, it's been wild. But it's more about understanding this is the message people needed to hear right now. Like that to me is what I'm getting out of this. Well, like it's, yes, 1 million people. That's remarkable, because this is how much this is resonating. And the clip that went viral, it says, teachers aren't superheroes. And what happens is when we make the correlation to superheroes and the comparison to superheroes, we forget that teachers are human. look at these superheroes who have no regard for their own well-being, right? I mean, I say in the clip, you don't ever hear Superman just taking a day for himself for his own well-being, right? That's ridiculous. Like, he's fine. He's totally fine. And so that narrative that teachers are superheroes is really dangerous. It's dangerous for everybody who is interacting with them because the expectations are so high, but also really dangerous for the educators themselves because they think, and I totally drank the Kool-Aid too. In fact, I wrote about it in my book years ago. The second line in my book said teachers are superheroes. That's how much I was drinking the Kool-Aid. But I needed to believe I was a superhero so I could justify all of the chaos. I could justify anything because I could take it. I was fine. I was fine. I was fine. I was not fine. We're not fine. And in acknowledging that I am human, I am mortal, and I actually need things, that's all of a sudden where we start to have a different conversation. And it's super important that we acknowledge the humanness of the people who are taking care of our kids.
Yes. Ooh, I've got to watch your TED Talk. This is
yes.
Yes.
I'll give you a link to that too.
I completely forgot. And you also have a book, right?
I do. Yeah. So that book is I wrote that specifically for music teachers, although it applies to everybody. You just kind of, insert whatever you want for the word music. But it's called A Place in the Staff, Finding Your Way as a Music Teacher. But there is going to be another book coming down the pike, Empowered Educator, once my dissertation is complete. Yes. one thing at a time. But yes, there's another book coming.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm excited to read your book, and I'm excited that you are doing this work because being in this work in this field, trying to support teachers with the bullying awareness education, I hear the frustrations. I hear that they feel alone, that the administration is either too busy, doesn't care, or doesn't have enough funding or enough time to make sure that they give them the best. And our teachers do. They deserve the best. And before we wrap it up, one of the things that I always tell parents is, support your parents, but myths and misconceptions get in the way. So are there any, say, like top 3 myths or misconceptions that you would like to share with listeners so that, we eradicate them and get those out of the way so we can provide better support to our teachers?
Yeah. I think the biggest one is this idea of like, we talked about it before, and I think I'm going to circle back to it, is this us versus them. And there's this us versus them in a lot of different ways, right? There's like child parent, there's child teacher, there's parent teacher, parent administrator, teacher administrator, right? And so whenever we're angsty about something, it's just really easy to point the finger. Well, if they would just, or if only they could, or shouldn't they be able to, or why don't they, whatever, right? Everybody is going through their own journey, period. And to do the inner introspective work as much as possible also provides you with another lens of grace and compassion for the other person across the table, right? It is not anybody's fault, right? We are here now because of a result of decades of ridiculous chaos and nonsensical policy about how we operate schools. I mean, schools are functioning essentially the same way as they did at the turn of the century, right? I mean, we don't live in that world anymore, yet that's how our school systems are designed. So we're basing a whole system on a tradition, which in my world, tradition is just peer pressure from dead people. Like, that's how I see tradition, right? And like, cool, tradition's awesome if it's serving you, right? I'm all for that. If it's serving you and it's meaningful and it makes sense and it's relevant, yes, this is part of our tradition here. But if we're just doing it because this is how we do it, that is not acceptable. I'm not available for that anymore. And the more people wake up to that, the less they're available for that too. And so understanding that all of these systems and structures, it's in the air that we breathe, right? And so it's nobody's fault. However, it is your responsibility to show up differently when you know better. And it is also your responsibility to find the avenues for information and knowledge so you can know better. It is not acceptable for me to just blindly walk through life in this role as an educator anymore. That is, like I said, I'm not available for that, which is why I do the work that I do. But it's not in us versus them. It's in all of us, and understanding that connected oneness, which can be very difficult to acknowledge in conflict, right? But it's there, and we are connected, and we are all working towards the same things. So finding ways to create common language, common ground, so we can start someplace and grow together instead of separately, I think is going to be essential for any kind of change.
Thank you so much. Last question. To the new teachers out there who are struggling, what advice would you give them?
This one's easy. This is the fundamental principle of Empowered Educator. The most generous thing you can do for your students is take care of yourself, period. Write that down. Make sure you look at it every day. Anytime you are feeling like I should do this or I should do that, or a good teacher does this or a good teacher does that, you look at that and you know that the most generous thing you can do for them is take care of yourself. Because if you are not well and feeling great, you're not actually showing up for them at all.
Very good. Sage advice. Thank you so much, Jen. I love having this conversation, and I'm sure you know this, that you and I could probably talk for hours and hours about this.
Yes. Well, I'm looking forward to continuing this even off air. This is just the beginning of Dali and Jen.
That's right. Well, thanks again, Jen, for coming on to the Dalitalks podcast and for always being, it's such a wealth of knowledge and a resource to our communities and to our teachers.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, did you like that episode? If you did, be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you may be listening and write a review. If you want more tips or some behind-the-scenes videos, make sure to follow my mom at Dalitalks on Instagram. You can turn on notifications for her posts and stories as well. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. See you next time.